The skies over Yara 4 had not always been the sickly green that now hung like a permanent bruise above the jungle canopy. There was a time, so the old one said, when the atmosphere shimmered with iridescent blues, when the twin moons cast silver instead of toxic chartreuse across the landscape. But that was before the ecological collapse, before the interstellar wars had ravaged the outer rim planets and left places like this to heal, or die, on their own. Rowan didn't care much about the planet's history. History didn't put food in your belly or keep the scavengers from your door. Survival was what mattered now, and survival meant keeping moving, keeping alert, and keeping to yourself. His mobile base, little more than a reinforced shipping container with treads and solar panels, groaned as it navigated the boundary between the wasteland and the luminescent jungle. The trees here grew impossibly tall, their trunks wider than 10 men could encircle with joined hands. But it wasn't their size that made them remarkable. It was the light. Every plant in the Yaran jungle glowed. Soft blues, vibrant greens, subtle purples emanated from leaves, bark, and even the moss that carpeted the forest floor. Scientists who had studied it before the wars called it bioluminescence. The locals called it the memory of the planet. Rowan called it a navigation hazard. The light interfered with his sensors, making mine detection nearly impossible after sundown. But sunset was still 2 hours away, which gave him just enough time to sweep the western sector for valuable minerals or salvageable tech before retreating to safer ground. He checked his atmospheric readings one more time before lowering the boarding ramp. The air was technically breathable, oxygen levels acceptable, toxins within tolerable limits, but he still strapped the filtration mask across his face. Better safe than sorry on a world where even the dew could burn your skin if you weren't careful. Terran, maintain perimeter security. He instructed the battered scout ship that served as both his transportation and his only company. Alert me if anything larger than a scavenger approaches within 1 kilometer. The ship's AI pinged an acknowledgement, its voice module having failed years ago. Like everything else in Rowan's possession, Terran was functional but far from optimal. Still, the craft had saved his life more times than he cared to count. Rowan descended from the base and felt the soft, spongy earth beneath his boots. The air smelled of decay and sweetness, an unsettling combination that never quite sat right in his lungs. He activated his portable scanner and began methodically sweeping for the distinctive energy signatures that indicated buried ordnance from the wars. Landmines were valuable on the black market. Their components could be repurposed for dozens of applications. Dangerous work, but it paid better than most other professions in the Outer Rim. The scanner led him deeper into the jungle than he usually ventured. As the foliage closed in around him, the natural glow from the vegetation grew stronger, casting everything in an ethereal light that made shadows dance where there shouldn't be any movement. The scanner chirped softly, suggesting something promising lay ahead. It wasn't the clean signature of a standard mine, but it was definitely technology, old technology, buried deep. That's when he heard it. A sound so unexpected in this wilderness that at first, he thought his mask's audio filters were malfunctioning. A sob, soft, frightened, and unmistakably sentient. Rowan froze, his hand instinctively moving to the blaster at his hip. He'd encountered the indigenous Yarans before. They typically avoided outsiders, but they could be territorial if provoked. Yet this didn't sound like a Yaran. It sounded like a child. "Hello?" he called, immediately regretting breaking the silence. Sound carried strangely in the luminescent forest, and predators had excellent hearing. The sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by a shuffling noise, and then silence. Rowan stood perfectly still, listening. His scanner continued to ping softly, indicating the technological anomaly was just ahead, in the same direction as the sound had come from. Against better judgment, he moved forward. The glowing underbrush parted as he approached a massive tree whose trunk pulsed with soft purple light. Nestled against its base, nearly hidden among luminous roots, was a small figure. A child indeed, but not human, not Yaren either. The small figure had violet skin that seemed almost translucent in places, revealing a network of delicate veins beneath. Her eyes were large, lacking pupils but shimmering with a golden light that matched the tree's inner glow. She wore tattered clothing that might once have been a flight suit, though it was now so damaged it was impossible to tell. Thin arms wrapped around equally thin legs, pulled tight to a chest that rose and fell with rapid breaths. Her head was hairless, save for a ridge of something like feathers that ran from her forehead to the nape of her neck. These feathers trembled as she stared up at Rowan, her expression a universal display of terror. "It's okay," Rowan said softly, crouching down to appear less threatening. "I won't hurt you." The child said nothing, but pressed herself more firmly against the tree, as if hoping to disappear into its luminous bark. Rowan glanced at his scanner. The technological signature was coming from the child. No, from something she wore. Around her neck hung an amulet that pulsed with energy, far beyond what any simple jewelry should possess. He held out his hands, palms up, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Are you hurt?" The child's eyes darted to his scanner, then to his face, then to the surrounding jungle. There was intelligence in that gaze, and fear, but also a wary calculation that seemed out of place in one so young. Slowly, she extended one arm, revealing a nasty gash that ran from wrist to elbow. It wasn't bleeding, but the edges of the wound glowed with the same purple light as the tree behind her. "That looks painful," Rowan said, reaching for the medkit at his belt. "May I?" The child didn't respond verbally, but she didn't pull away either when he slowly moved closer. From his kit, he extracted a canister of nanofoam, universal antiseptic and sealant, effective on most known species. He sprayed it gently over the wound, watching as the foam expanded, cleaned, and then sealed the injury. "There, better?" The child examined her arm with obvious fascination, then nodded. It was a small gesture, but significant. She understood him, even if she couldn't or wouldn't speak. Rowan's communicator chirped, making them both jump. Terran was sending an alert. He checked the display and cursed under his breath. Movement detected at the perimeter. Multiple signatures. Moving fast and purposeful. Not animals. Hunters. "We need to go," he said, standing and offering his hand to the child. "It's not safe here." She stared at his hand for a long moment, then at his face, as if searching for something. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she placed her small violet hand in his calloused one and stood. That's when they both heard it, the distinctive whine of grav bikes in the distance, growing louder. "Run," Rowan said, and she did, keeping pace with surprising agility as they darted through the glowing underbrush. Behind them, the grav bike's engines grew louder, accompanied by the sharp crack of energy weapons firing into the air. Warning shots. Whoever was pursuing them wanted something alive. Or someone. Rowan glanced down at the child running beside him, at the strange amulet bouncing against her chest as she moved. It pulsed with energy that matched her quickened heartbeat. And he suddenly understood with cold clarity. They weren't hunting him. They were hunting her. The jungle seemed to respond to their flight, luminous vines curling away from their path, while simultaneously thickening behind them. The massive trees appeared to shift, never quite blocking their way, but making pursuit more difficult. Rowan had heard stories about the strange sentience of Yara Furfur's ecosystem, but had dismissed them as superstition. Now, he wasn't so sure. "This way," he urged, guiding the child toward a narrow ravine where the grav bikes couldn't follow. They slid down the embankment, mud and glowing moss cushioning their descent. At the bottom, A small stream flowed with water that glowed faintly blue. Clean water. A rarity on outer rim planets. Rowan cupped some in his hand and offered it to the child, who drank gratefully before he took some himself. Above them, the gravbikes circled, their riders shouting to each other in the harsh dialect of mercenaries. Rowan recognized the insignia painted on their chassis, the Crimson Talon, enforcers for the local warlord. Orin. Whatever this child was, whatever that amulet did, Orin wanted it badly enough to send his best hunters. "We can't stay here," Rowan whispered. "They'll have scanners. Can you keep going?" The child nodded again, more confidently this time. They followed the stream, deeper into the jungle, where the luminescence grew so intense that night became like twilight. The trees here were ancient, their trunks spiraling upward in impossible geometries, branches intertwining to form a cathedral of living light, hundreds of meters overhead. The ground was carpeted with soft moss that absorbed the sound of their footsteps, making it easier to move silently. After what felt like hours, Rowan's communicator vibrated again. The gravbikes had withdrawn to the jungle's edge. For now, they were safe. He found a small clearing where a fallen tree created a natural shelter. Its exposed roots formed a canopy of sorts, beneath which they could rest without being visible from above. Once settled, Rowan offered the child a nutrient bar from his pack. She sniffed it suspiciously before taking a tiny bite, then devoured the rest with obvious hunger. "What's your name?" Rowan asked when she had finished. "I'm Rowan." The child tilted her head, those golden eyes studying him intently. After a moment, she reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart. "Rowan," she said, her voice soft and melodic, with an accent he couldn't place. Then she touched her own chest. "Tari." "Tari," he repeated. "Nice to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." She didn't smile. He wasn't sure if her species could, but the feathers on her head rippled in what might have been amusement. "Where are you from, Tari? How did you end up alone in this jungle?" She frowned, clearly struggling with the language. Finally, she pointed upward, beyond the canopy, toward the stars. "Space?" Rowan asked. "You came from off-world?" Tari nodded vigorously. "Crash?" he prompted, mimicking an explosion with his hands. Her eyes dimmed momentarily, a shadow of grief passing over her features. She nodded again, more slowly this time, and held up 2 fingers. "2 ships?" Rowan guessed. "Or 2 people?" Tari held up 2 fingers again, then pointed to herself, then made a running motion with her fingers. "2 of you, and you ran away." Another nod, followed by a gesture that encompassed the jungle around them, then a shrug. "And now you're lost," Rowan concluded. "That makes 2 of us. Kid." Tari's attention shifted to his scanner, which continued to ping softly, its readings fluctuating wildly in the presence of her amulet. She reached for it curiously, and he let her examine the device. To his surprise, she seemed to understand its function immediately, pressing buttons with deliberate intent rather than random experimentation. The scanner's display changed. The standard detection mode replaced by a complex 3-dimensional map that Rowan had never seen before. At its center, pulsed a bright point of light that matched the energy signature of Tari's amulet. Spreading outward from that point were lines, like veins or roots, extending deep into the jungle. "What did you do?" he asked, taking the scanner back. Tari pointed to her amulet, then to the scanner, then swept her arm in an arc that encompassed the jungle around them. "The amulet is connected to something out there," Rowan said slowly. "Something important." She nodded emphatically, then made a gesture with her hands that suggested something large, hidden underground. "A ship?" he guessed. "A crashed ship." Tari shook her head and made a different gesture, hands forming a sphere, then expanding outward. "A station? A base?" She seemed frustrated by the limitation of communication, but nodded hesitantly, as if his guess was close enough. Rowan studied the scanner's display more carefully. The pattern of energy lines was too regular to be natural, too complex to be coincidental. Whatever lay at the end of those lines was engineered, sophisticated, and very, very old. A relic, he said quietly. Some kind of ancient installation. Tari's eyes brightened at this, and she nodded eagerly. And that's what Orin's mercenaries are after, isn't it? Not just you, but what you can lead them to. Her expression darkened, the golden light in her eyes dimming with what might have been shame or fear. She clutched the amulet protectively. Hey, Rowan said gently. I'm not after it either. But we need to understand what we're dealing with if we're going to stay ahead of those hunters. Tari seemed to consider this, then slowly removed the amulet from around her neck. She held it out to him, her small hand trembling slightly. Rowan took it carefully. The amulet was heavier than it looked, made of a metal he couldn't identify. Its surface was etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. At its center was a crystal that pulsed with the same golden light as Tari's eyes. The moment his fingers closed around it, the crystal flared brightly, and images flooded his mind. A vast chamber beneath the jungle, walls covered in the same shifting patterns as the amulet, a pedestal at the center, waiting for something to be placed upon it. A sense of immense power, dormant but not dead, waiting to be awakened. And danger. Terrible danger if that power fell into the wrong hands. Rowan gasped and nearly dropped the amulet. Tari caught it deftly and returned it to her neck, watching him with concern. That's quite a responsibility for someone so small, he said when he could speak again. She shrugged, a very human gesture that conveyed both resignation and determination. We should rest while we can, Rowan decided. Tomorrow, we'll figure out our next move. Tari curled up beside him, her small body radiating a gentle warmth that was surprisingly comforting in the cool night air. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she remained alert, her golden eyes scanning the surrounding jungle for threats. It's okay, Rowan assured her. Terran will warn us if anyone approaches. You can sleep. Slowly, reluctantly. She closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing deepened, and the feathers on her head relaxed against her scalp. Rowan watched her sleep, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought this alien child into his life. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even particularly good at being a decent human being most days. He was a scavenger, a survivor, someone who avoided complications and attachments because they invariably led to pain. Yet, here he was, in the heart of the most dangerous jungle on Yara 4, protecting a child who carried a key to something ancient and powerful, something that a warlord was willing to kill for. He should leave her, take her to the nearest settlement and walk away. That would be the smart play, the survivor's move. But as he watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest, saw the fragile trust in the way she had curled up beside him, he knew he couldn't do it. Whatever was happening here, whatever she was running from or toward, he was part of it now, for better or worse. The next morning, they set out following the energy lines displayed on Rowan's scanner. The jungle grew denser as they progressed, the trees more ancient, their luminescence more intense. Tari moved with increasing confidence, occasionally stopping to touch a tree trunk or examine a particular plant with obvious recognition. You've been here before, Rowan realized. You know this forest. Tari made a so-so gesture with her hand, then pointed to her head, then swept her arm to indicate the jungle. You know it. But you haven't been here? Rowan frowned, trying to understand. Like ancestral memory, genetic knowledge. She brightened at this and nodded enthusiastically. Your people, they're connected to this place somehow. Tari touched her amulet, then the nearest tree, then drew a line between them with her finger. The amulet connects you to the forest, Rowan guessed. Or to whatever's hidden here. She nodded again. then froze suddenly, her head tilted, as if listening. Rowan strained his ears but heard nothing unusual, just the normal sounds of the jungle, the soft rustle of glowing leaves, the distant calls of arboreal creatures. But Tari's expression had turned to one of alarm. She grabbed his hand and pulled him urgently toward a dense thicket of luminous ferns. They had barely concealed themselves when Rowan finally heard what had alarmed her. Voices, human voices, approaching from the direction they had come. Not the mechanical whine of grav bikes this time, but the heavy footfalls of armored boots crushing underbrush. "Spread out," commanded a gruff voice. "The tracker says they passed this way recently. The alien brat can't have gone far, and the mine hunter's with her." "Why doesn't the boss just blast this whole section of jungle from orbit?" complained another voice. "Be a lot easier than this manhunt." "Because... genius," replied the first voice. "Whatever's putting out those energy readings might not survive an orbital bombardment. And since that's what he's actually after, we do this the hard way." Rowan felt Tari's small hand grip his tightly. He squeezed back reassuringly, though he was far from confident about their chances. These weren't just any mercenaries. They were Crimson Talon elites, equipped with the latest tracking technology and weapons that could reduce a person to atoms in seconds. "When I give the signal," he whispered to Tari, "run straight ahead as fast as you can. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'll be right behind you." She shook her head vehemently and pointed to the approaching mercenaries, then made a circling motion with her finger. "They're surrounding us?" Rowan asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Tari nodded grimly. "How many?" She held up both hands, fingers spread wide. 10. Too many to fight, too many to outrun. They needed a distraction, something to create an opening. Rowan reached into his pack and extracted a small metallic sphere, a leftover from his days with the mining corps, before he'd gone freelance. It wasn't designed as a weapon, but in a pinch, it would create one hell of a diversion. "Cover your ears," he instructed Tari, who immediately complied. He activated the sphere, set the timer for 10 seconds, and hurled it as far as he could in the opposite direction from where they intended to flee. The sphere sailed through the air in a high arc, disappearing into the luminous foliage some 50 meters away. The explosion that followed wasn't particularly destructive, but it was loud, and the brilliant flash of light it created was amplified and refracted by the bioluminescent jungle into a dazzling display that would temporarily blind anyone looking in that direction. "Now!" Rowan shouted, grabbing Tari's hand and bursting from their hiding place. They ran blindly through the undergrowth, branches and vines whipping at their faces. Behind them, shouts of confusion turned to anger as the mercenaries realized they'd been tricked. "There! Movement at 2 o'clock!" A bolt of energy sizzled past Rowan's ear, so close he felt the heat of it on his skin. Another struck a tree just ahead of them, splitting its trunk and sending a shower of luminous splinters in all directions. Tari suddenly veered to the left, pulling Rowan along with surprising strength for her size. They plunged through a curtain of hanging vines into a clearing dominated by a massive tree stump. The tree that had once stood here must have been colossal. The stump was easily 30 meters across, its surface a maze of concentric rings that glowed with a pulsing blue light. Tari released Rowan's hand and ran to the center of the stump, where a small depression collected rainwater into a natural basin. She placed her amulet into the water and stepped back, her eyes fixed on it with an intensity that made Rowan nervous. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "We need to keep moving." But Tari held up one hand in a clear gesture for patience, her attention never leaving the amulet. The water in the basin began to glow, first matching the golden light of the amulet, then shifting through a spectrum of colors before settling on a deep, vibrant purple. The light spread outward along the rings of the stump, following their spiral pattern until the entire surface was illuminated. Then, with a sound like a massive stone door grinding open, the center of the stump began to descend, forming a spiral staircase that wound downward into darkness. Tari retrieved her amulet, now pulsing more intensely than before, and gestured for Rowan to follow her down the stairs. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. But the shouts of the mercenaries were growing closer. They had no choice. The staircase descended deep into the earth, the walls around them lined with the same luminescent material as the jungle above, providing just enough light to see by. The air grew cooler as they descended, carrying a strange scent, not the decay and sweetness of the jungle, but something older, like dust and ozone and the metallic tang of ancient machinery. After what seemed like hundreds of steps, they emerged into a vast chamber that took Rowan's breath away. It was exactly as he had seen in the vision from the amulet, but the reality was far more impressive. The chamber was cylindrical, at least 100 meters in diameter and half that in height. Its walls were covered in the shifting patterns he had glimpsed before, but now he could see that they were actually writing, symbols in a language so old it predated human contact with this part of the galaxy. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, simple in design, but radiating an aura of importance. Around it, arranged in concentric circles, were what appeared to be workstations or control consoles, their surfaces dark and dormant. Tari approached the pedestal with reverence, her small feet making no sound on the stone floor. She gestured for Rowan to join her, pointing to the top of the pedestal, where a depression matched the shape of her amulet perfectly. "Is this what those mercenaries are after?" Rowan asked, his voice echoing in the vast space. "What happens if you place the amulet there?" Tari's expression became troubled. She pointed to the amulet, then to the pedestal, then swept her arms outward to encompass the entire chamber. Next, she pointed to her eyes, then to her head, and finally placed both hands over her heart. "It activates something," Rowan interpreted, "something that can be seen, or known, or felt." She nodded, then added another gesture, her hands starting close together, then moving apart to suggest growth or expansion. "Something that spreads? That grows?" A horrible thought occurred to him. "It's not a weapon, is it?" Tari shook her head firmly, then touched a nearby plant that had somehow taken root in this underground chamber. She mimed it growing larger, healthier. "It heals," Rowan realized. "It restores." The look of relief on Tari's face told him he had finally understood. This wasn't a weapon of destruction, but one of restoration, technology from an ancient civilization that could potentially reverse the ecological damage to Yara 4. No wonder Orin wanted it. Control over such technology would make him the most powerful warlord in the sector. He could hold entire planets hostage, promising restoration only in exchange for absolute fealty. "We can't let them have this," Rowan said firmly. Before Tari could respond, a slow clapping echoed through the chamber. They both spun to face the entrance, where a figure now stood silhouetted against the faint light from the stairwell. "Very touching," said the figure, stepping forward to reveal a man in his 50s, his face lined with scars, his body encased in armor that made him appear larger than life. The minehunter and the alien brat, united in their noble cause. Orin, the warlord himself, not just his mercenaries. This was worse than Rowan had feared. "I must thank you both," Orin continued, gesturing to the armed men who now filed into the chamber behind him. "Finding this place would have taken my team much longer without your help. Now, child, hand over the amulet, and I might let your protector live." Tari clutched the amulet to her chest, her golden eyes wide with fear but also determination. "She's not giving you anything," Rowan said, stepping in front of her protectively. "This technology isn't meant for someone like you. It's meant to heal, not to be used as leverage for your power games." Orin laughed, a sound without humor. "Power games? Is that what you think this is about? This is about survival, Mindhunter, survival and progress. The strong take what they need to ensure their continued existence. The weak perish. That's the law of nature, even on a broken world like this one. He signaled to his men, who raised their weapons, aiming directly at Rowan. "Last chance," Orin said. "The amulet, or you both die here, and I take it anyway." Rowan felt Tari move behind him, heard the soft pad of her feet as she stepped toward the pedestal. He turned to stop her, but the look in her eyes stopped him instead. There was fear there. Yes, but also a certainty, a knowledge of what must be done. She placed the amulet on the pedestal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the amulet began to glow, its light spreading to the pedestal and then to the floor beneath it, illuminating previously invisible patterns that radiated outward like the roots of a massive tree. The control consoles around the perimeter of the chamber flickered to life, displays showing diagrams and readouts in the same ancient language as the wall inscriptions. "Yes," Orin breathed, his eyes gleaming with avarice. "Magnificent." Rowan tensed, ready to grab Tari and make a desperate run for it, though he knew their chances were slim to none. But Tari remained calm, her attention fixed on the amulet, which now hovered a few centimeters above the pedestal, rotating slowly. A beam of light shot from the amulet to the ceiling of the chamber, where it split into thousands of smaller beams that illuminated every corner of the vast space. The air itself seemed to come alive, shimmering with particles that glowed like miniature stars. And then, the walls began to move. Not the physical walls of the chamber, but the patterns upon them, shifting and flowing like liquid, reforming into new configurations. Images appeared, Yara 4 as it once was, a paradise of diverse ecosystems, the arrival of a spacefaring race that resembled Tari, the construction of installations like this one across the planet, and finally, a cataclysm, a war that left the world scarred and dying. "Memory," Rowan whispered, understanding at last. "This place is a repository of memory, the collective knowledge and history of an entire civilization. And their technology," Orin added, his voice hungry. "The means to terraform worlds, to control ecological systems on a planetary scale." He turned to his men. "Secure the amulet and the girl. Kill the minehunter." The mercenaries advanced, weapons raised. Rowan backed toward Tari, his mind racing for a way out of this trap. But as the first mercenary reached the outer ring of control consoles, something unexpected happened. The console nearest to the man activated fully, its surface now covered in rapidly scrolling text. A beam of light shot from it to the mercenary's weapon, which immediately powered down, its energy cells depleted in an instant. Around the chamber, other consoles activated in sequence, targeting the weapons of each advancing mercenary. Within seconds, every energy weapon in the room was rendered useless. Orin's face contorted with rage. "What is this? What have you done?" Tari stepped forward, her small figure suddenly seeming to command the vast space. She pointed to Orin, then to the door, her meaning clear. "Leave." "You think I'm afraid of a child and a scavenger?" Orin snarled. "Men, take them down. Old-fashioned way if you have to." The mercenaries drew combat knives and advanced again. But now, the floor beneath their feet began to shift, the stone becoming soft and yielding like quicksand. They struggled to maintain their balance, some falling to their knees as the ground threatened to swallow them. Orin himself seemed unaffected, protected perhaps by some technology in his armor. He strode forward, drawing a wicked-looking blade from a sheath on his back. "I'll handle this myself." Rowan pushed Tari behind him and drew his own knife, a poor match for Orin's weapon, but all he had. "Run," he told her. "Find a way out. I'll hold him off." But Tari didn't run. Instead, she placed her small hand on Rowan's arm and closed her eyes in concentration. The amulet, still hovering above the pedestal, pulsed with increased intensity, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a deafening hum that made everyone, including Orin, cover their ears in pain. The hum modulated into a complex pattern that Rowan somehow understood was language, the native tongue of Tari's people, being broadcast through the ancient systems of the installation. It wasn't words exactly, but pure concepts transmitted directly to the mind. Preservation, memory, balance, renewal. And a warning. This power is not for conquest. It is a trust, a responsibility. Those who would use it for domination will be rejected. The floor beneath Orin began to shift as it had for his men, but more aggressively, forming tentacle-like protrusions that wrapped around his legs and began to pull him down. "No!" Orin shouted, slashing at the stone tentacles with his blade. Where the blade struck, the stone crumbled, but for each tentacle he destroyed, two more formed to take its place. "This is mine! I found it! I claimed it!" "It's not yours to claim," Rowan said, understanding flowing through him along with the conceptual language of the installation. "It belongs to the planet, to the memory of the civilization that built it. And it's rejected you." Orin's rage turned to fear as the stone continued to envelop him, now reaching his waist. His men, seeing their leader's plight, began a disorganized retreat toward the stairs, abandoning him to his fate. "Help me!" Orin commanded, but they were already gone, fleeing back to the surface. Rowan felt Tari's hand slip into his. She tugged gently, leading him away from the struggling warlord, toward a section of wall that was now sliding open to reveal another passage. "Wait," Rowan said, looking back at Orin, who was now chest-deep in the stone floor, still fighting futilely against his imprisonment. "We can't just leave him to die." Tari's expression was solemn, but resolute. She shook her head and pointed to the wall displays, where images now showed ecological systems failing, species going extinct, the delicate balance of life disrupted by weapons of war. "He caused this?" Rowan asked. "Orin was responsible for the ecological disaster on Yara 4. Tari shook her head again and pointed to the images of warfare, then to Orin, making a connection gesture. "Not him specifically, but people like him, warlords, conquerors." Rowan understood now. "And this is the judgment of the system, of the planet itself." Tari nodded, her eyes sad but determined. She tugged at his hand again, more urgently this time. Rowan took one last look at Orin, now up to his neck in the living stone, his eyes wild with terror. Then he turned and followed Tari into the newly revealed passage. They ran through corridors lined with the same luminescent material as the jungle above, past rooms filled with dormant machinery of unimaginable purpose, up ramps that spiraled ever upward toward the surface. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of the installation fully awakening, humming energy fields, the grinding of massive gears, the rush of water through long dry channels. When they finally emerged into the open air, it was through an opening in the trunk of a massive tree, not the stump they had descended through, but a living giant, perhaps, a kilometer away from where they had entered. The jungle around them seemed more alive somehow, the bioluminescence brighter, the colors more vibrant. And it was spreading. As they watched, the enhanced luminescence raced through the forest like a wave, plants straightening, strengthening, renewing themselves as the energy passed through them. In the distance, they could see the mercenaries fleeing on their grav bikes, tiny specks against the vastness of the rejuvenating jungle. "It's healing," Rowan said in wonder. "The whole forest is healing itself." Tari smiled, a real smile this time, her face lighting up with joy that transcended species differences. She pointed to her amulet, which now hung around her neck once more, though Rowan hadn't seen her retrieve it from the pedestal. "You didn't just activate it," he realized. "You're connected to it somehow. Part of it." She nodded, then pointed to him, then to herself, then made a circle that encompassed them both. "We're both part of it now?" Rowan asked, surprised. Tari nodded again, her expression serious. She pointed to the jungle, then to the sky, then to her heart, and finally to Rowan's. "Guardians," he said, understanding her meaning. "We're its guardians now." The responsibility should have frightened him. A month ago, it would have. But something had changed in Rowan over the past 2 days. Finding Tari, protecting her, witnessing the awakening of the ancient installation. It had awakened something in him as well, a purpose beyond mere survival. "What about your people?" he asked. "Will they come for you now that the installation is active?" Tari's expression grew distant, a shadow of grief passing over her features. She shook her head slowly, then pointed to the stars, made a diving motion with her hand, and then closed her eyes briefly. "They're gone," Rowan interpreted. "Your ship crashed and they didn't survive." She nodded, a single tear escaping from her golden eyes and trailing down her violet cheek. "You're alone." Another nod, more hesitant this time. Rowan knelt down to her level, looking directly into those luminous eyes. "Not anymore," he said firmly. "I'm not much of a guardian, and I know even less about taking care of kids, especially ones from other planets. But if you'll have me, I'll stay. We'll figure this out together." Tari's face brightened, the feathers on her head rippling with emotion. She threw her small arms around Rowan's neck in a gesture that needed no interpretation. Over the next few weeks, they established a new base at the edge of the rejuvenating jungle. Rowan's mobile unit was still functional, and with some modifications, it became a comfortable home for both of them. Terran, the scout ship, was repurposed as a monitoring station, its sensors recalibrated to track the spread of the healing wave as it moved across Yara 4's surface. The transformation of the planet was remarkable. Areas that had been toxic wastelands for generations began to support life again. The sickly green of the sky gradually shifted toward blue as atmospheric composition normalized. Indigenous species thought extinct reappeared, emerging from hidden refuges to reclaim their territories. Most remarkable of all was the response of the Yaran people. Initially wary of the changes, they soon recognized the healing for what it was. Small groups began to approach Rowan and Tari's base, bringing gifts of food and handcrafted items, offering friendship and alliance. From them, Rowan learned more about the history of Yara 4, how it had once been a paradise, home to advanced civilization that had lived in harmony with the planet's unique ecosystem, how interstellar war had brought destruction, driving the original inhabitants to desperate measures to preserve what they could of their world and their knowledge, how the Yarans, descendants of later settlers who had arrived after the cataclysm, had kept alive legends of a time when the jungle sang with light and life flowed in abundance. And now, thanks to Tari, those legends were becoming reality once more. The child herself was thriving. Though she still couldn't speak much of Rowan's language, they had developed a sophisticated system of gestures and expressions that allowed for complex communication. Through this, she taught him about her people, the Xandar, an ancient race that had settled on Yara 4 millennia ago and merged their genetic material with the indigenous life to create a symbiotic relationship with the planet itself. Tari, it turned out, was only half Xandarian. Her other half was human, the result of a genetic experiment aimed at creating beings who could bridge the gap between the two species. She was one of only a handful of such hybrids, sent to Yara 4 to activate the dormant restoration system that her full-blooded Xandarian ancestors could no longer operate due to genetic drift. The crashed ship had contained her entire research team, the last of the Xandarian scientists and their human partners. Only Tari had survived, protected perhaps by her unique genetic makeup, or perhaps by the amulet that had recognized her as its rightful bearer. As for Orin and his mercenaries, they were never seen again. The local warlords, hearing rumors of what had happened to their most powerful peer, gave the rejuvenating jungle a wide berth. Some even began to offer protection to the Uran villages, perhaps hoping to curry favor with whatever power now controlled the planet's destiny. But that power wasn't interested in politics or conquest. Under Tari's guidance, with Rowan's protection, the ancient installation continued its work of healing, expanding its influence gradually but inexorably across the face of Yara 4. One evening, as they sat outside their base watching the twin moons rise, now silver again, not toxic green, Tari tugged at Rowan's sleeve and pointed to the stars with a questioning expression. "Missing home?" he asked gently. She shook her head, then pointed to him, then to herself, then to the base behind them. "This is home now," Rowan agreed. "For both of us." Tari smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. Then she pointed to the installation, visible now as a subtle glow on the horizon, and made a gesture that encompassed the entire planet. "And this is our responsibility," Rowan added. "Our purpose." She nodded, satisfied, and leaned against him, small and fragile and incredibly strong all at once. Rowan put his arm around her shoulders, marveling at the strange turns life could take. A month ago, he had been alone, a survivor with no purpose beyond making it to the next day. Now he was a guardian, a protector, a father? The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right, complete. As the moons climbed higher, casting their silver light over the luminescent jungle, Rowan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps had never truly experienced before. Peace. Not just the absence of danger, though that was part of it, but a deeper peace, born of purpose and connection, of belonging, of home. In the distance, the jungle sang with light, a symphony of renewal spreading across a world being reborn. And in that light, a man and a child from different stars found their shared destiny. Guardians of memory, protectors of life, healers of worlds. Their story was just beginning.